So you'll probably seen from some of the comms that we've already been sharing and from the emails that you'll have received about the event, we've got 4 amazing panel members with us today. And I'll not steal the limelight and introduce them, but here on the screen now you can see who we've got, and they're all waiting in the wings to come on to our panel. So we will kick off the panel and welcome everybody onto the call. So I will just select you randomly to introduce yourselves to the rest of the members on the call today. So Michelle, would you go first, please?
I knew that was going to happen.
You popped up first on my screen, so that's the pressure.
My name's Michelle Kelly. I run my own company, Bid Thinking. I've run it for basically nearly 15 years now. I specialise in working with universities across all sectors, but specifically in the context of Sheffield Hallam University, I work a lot with the Advanced Wellbeing Research Centre. My role, what I do primarily, is I specialise in putting strategic research partnerships together between industry and academia. And then I also will look for funding opportunities and write the bid submissions. My background doesn't come from there. I come from a regional development agency background, but previous to that, I worked commercially in international sales and operations for ICI, and prior to that with IBM in New York.
Thanks, Michelle. Thank you. That was great. Helen, could you go next, please?
Hi everyone, Helen Williams here from Helping Entrepreneurs Win. It's a coaching business for helping businesses and individuals with their personal and their professional development. I'm also an investor myself. I've got a couple of businesses in property and portfolio building, as well as the coaching business that has been founded by myself as well 3.5 years ago. Prior to that, I was in the corporate world and I've worked in sales, commercial roles and hospitality, predominantly in the health, wellbeing and sports sectors.
Thanks, Helen. That's amazing. Agnes.
Hello, I'm Agnes Crutchard. I work for Medipex, which is the NHS innovation in Yorkshire and Humber. I'm a bit the exception as I don't run my business. I've never run my business, but I've worked for about 25 years now in the new tech sector, originally in the environmental sector, and for the past 10 years in the healthcare sector, providing support to industry or university in investigating their market potential, and working with NHS Trust into investigating new technology and potential to turn them into commercial product. I've mainly worked in small company, less than 10, and that present its opportunity and challenges, and that's probably some of what I will share today with you.
Thank you, Agnes. And Lindsay.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Yes, my name is Lindsay Cook. I am a co-founder and director of a healthcare consultancy called Wicked Minds. We've been going for 9 years this August. I have a scientific background, used to be a toxicologist, so I've got a real interest in health and well-being. I have been fortunate enough to sit on lots of different NHS boards, and that's sort of where I'm leading at the moment, women in leadership on boards. I sit on the National Chemotherapy CRG. I'm a non-executive director for the NHS and also for a private company, and a trustee for 2 charities, one national charity, which is the National Rheumatoid Arthritis Society, and the other one is a local charity, which is the Anglican Care Trust, and also a mentor for the AWRC. So it's great to be with you all today.
Yeah, thank you. And it's probably important to add that you're all mentors on the AWRC Wellbeing Accelerator. So, and it's been amazing to have you. Thank you. So let's kick off with quite a broad question. Why is International Women's Day important? Why are events like this important? Would anyone care to go first? Don't be shy.
I don't mind going first.
Go on, Helen, thank you.
I just think that having events like this is just so important to get a collective approach together, and recognise all of amazing women, but the amazing work that they do as well. I just think that if we get everybody together, we are understanding what people are doing, how then they are pushing boundaries. You know, we're raising awareness. You've got a couple of topic questions that you want us to cover today. And those are the kind of things that often get swept under the carpet. And we can talk about them in small groups, but the more collective that we have this approach, the more power it's got behind something that we're trying to create change. We're trying to create success and fulfillment for women and positions in business.
Yeah, absolutely. Lindsay.
Yeah, I want to pick up on Helen's point, because the thing I like about it is it's around increasing that visibility of women's achievements. I think that, you know, we all know, but at the same time, do we actually utilize the platform enough? So this one day gives us the chance to increase the visibility and celebrate. I also think that the hashtag choose to challenge is an interesting one, because that does mean that we have to be brave, and we have to look at providing that call to action to get that, accelerating that gender parity that we are all striving for. So I think it gives us that time to celebrate.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, yeah. I think it does give the chance to celebrate and to share experience, to also to raise the issue about the fact that maybe we, you know, some of us are at advanced stage, we've got, you know, businesses or we've got careers, and there's still a lot of women who've not reached that stage. But the other aspect to this is also to make men understand what are difficulties are, and working in a partnership. You know, it's not about, which was my thought initially, you know, when I was aware of women's events. I always feared that it was about, you know, bashing women and men going against men, and whereas nowadays it's more about raising awareness and helping and working with men to improve our situation, but also get an understanding about what the difficulties that men are facing. It's not just, you know, one against the other. It's about, complementary work.
Absolutely. It's a really good point. Michelle, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, this is quite a tricky one for me, because I never go through my daily working life from an entrepreneur point of view, all through my career, thinking of things in terms of men or women. Mm. I always think much more about the limitations I place upon myself. And I think one of the things that's really lovely about a day like this is that we get to remind people, not just women, but men, also to inject a sense of self-belief. The thing that I really want to emphasize and bring to today is all the successes I've had in terms of my career and my development has been because of the people I surround myself in my network with, people that are batting in my corner, strong people. I have lots of women in my network. There's one very special woman in my network who's actually bumped onto the call today, actually, Moira Carminati. Hello. But that want you to survive, to not just survive, but to thrive, the words of Megan. And it's really important, I think, to reinforce to women, and maybe sometimes move away from what the media is pitching at you in terms of these stereotypes, and to just take that away and say, regardless of who you are, quite often you are the self-limiter on your own capabilities. The most important thing I've learned is I've surrounded myself with not many, but important people, men or women, who have my best interests at heart and are prepared to tell me the truth, whether I'm doing a great thing or I'm doing the wrong thing. So I think that's my message today. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if the man-woman thing for me is as important as that reminder.
Mm-hmm. That's a really interesting point. So with that in mind, Michelle, I know it sounds like you've got a really good, strong network behind you. And like you say, people rooting for you, people in your corner. But have you ever faced any inequality or bias because you're a woman?
Absolutely. And I'm going to be really controversial here, but it wasn't from a man.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had a really fascinating career track. When I was very young, graduated out of university, I went straight to the States and I worked in New York. And I think when I was working with IBM, I didn't come across anything where I'd say a sexual divide. It was an aggressive working environment where the focus was on the goal. Yeah. The first time I came across it was ironically when I went to work for the public sector. So I moved from IBM over to ICI, and then I moved over to the Welsh Development Agency. And interestingly, it was the first time I'd come across the concept of political correctness in the workplace. Primarily because we used to have training on it. When I worked in the Welsh Development Agency, we were even told that we couldn't say black coffee in Welsh because it was racist. So I became very aware of these issues in a public sector environment. And actually, when I was there, it's when I felt the worst about myself in terms of my capabilities and my esteem. And it was actually a female boss that made me feel that way. Now, I've since looked back, and I don't know whether it was because I was another female, but it was certainly because I was a young graduate. And I think that I was perceived not necessarily as a threat, but she did not know how to manage my ideas and my creativity and my enthusiasm. And I worked for them for about 8 years. And I have to say, I've never felt more like a square peg in a round hole. I used to hate appraisals. I used to hate perceiving that I had to do things in a certain way. And my whole creativity just felt crushed by this one person. So yeah, that would be my
interesting. Can anyone relate? Has anybody had a similar experience or another experience where they face inequality or bias? You're nodding, some are nodding. Agnes, you're shaking.
I've not. Sorry, I really can't relate. I've never actually faced, and I can't remember ever facing inequality, either a woman or as a woman of colour. I've lived in different continents. I've lived in the African continent. I've lived in Europe, and I've travelled as well. And I don't remember ever, having anything, offensive said to me. And I wonder sometimes, is it because I didn't notice, something that was said to me, or it was just circumstances where I've not come across people, that express that kind of opinion. I think maybe sometimes it's trying to see, it's sometimes down to people insecurity, wanting to feel victims and seeing this, aspect of life. But the other side of this is that, these happen, people who will be offensive to someone, whether because they're women or men, because they're different color, because they've got, different, physical disability, or, whatever. There are some people who pick on anything on people. It's just how you react, to this behavior. In terms of inequality of women and men, the only thing that could recall is when I was a child, as a girl. I'm from a family where there were 2 girls and 2 boys, and the girls were treated differently to boys in terms of protection. So the permission to go out was more loose for boys than for girls, and that's probably, but it's down to culture sometimes, that kind of behavior, or different parents have different rules. But yeah, that's the only time I can really recall.
But that's actually quite refreshing and nice to hear. And I mean, I know I certainly have had experiences personally where I've experienced inequality, bias, and even sexual harassment in the workplace. Absolutely not at Sheffield Hallam, I must point that out. But in a previous employer, I have faced that. So Helen or Lindsay, have you had any circumstances where you've faced those kind of situations? Helen, you seem to be.
It's never affected my professional development. It's never affected whether or not I've got a role or been promoted. I don't have any of this now, by the way, in a self-employed role. It's probably I've got more control over who I do work with as well. But yeah, definitely in terms of then reference to sexual references, suggestive behaviour, stuff like that. I remember in my early 20s, one of my senior bosses that was like one of the national bosses. I remember him even saying in the office to me, oh yeah, just wear a skirt and you'll get the sale. I'm like, you can't even get away with saying something like that now. And you know, comments such as like, oh, you must have slept with the boss to get the promotion and the job and things like that. And I've mentioned that I came from a hospitality background, so you know you're in an environment where there's a lot of groups of, it was predominantly men, and a drinking culture. So suggestive remarks and things like that actually then became part of the territory that you just had to suck it up and just get on with it. And again, it's kind of like I've always been of the ability to laugh it off, not take it, you know, to heart and things. It's never really affected my confidence or any of my belief. I never felt inferior by it. It just came as part of that acceptance, when actually it shouldn't necessarily be that way, should it? It's, you know, it's something that we have to accept. But I do want to say as well, I do relate to Michelle in what Michelle said about the controversial aspect of it, that the lack of support sometimes, and I have had this, comes from women. And I've had this as well, where it's not been an exclusive divide between men versus women. It has come from like the bitchiness and the rivalry and the territorial kind of aspect of women. And then them not actually wanting to see you do well, or sort of downplay something that you've done, or the catty remarks or things like that, where it's kind of like collectively, and this is something that I think, Michelle, you'd said this in the beginning as well, collectively, you know, if it's something that we can all work on together, men, women, regardless of age, race, background, anything, you know, we will all do better in business, in life in general, like of all walks of life. You know, we will all succeed. But that's a bit of an idealism. I'm aware of that, but yeah, it's been a definite challenge when it's come to it.
Lindsay, what about you?
So yeah, I have, but probably for different reasons. So I sort of started in the pharmaceutical sector, which was, you know, very male dominated, used to be known as the men's club. You know, they had the suits and they were all managers. And I also remember my boss saying to one of my female co-workers that she was the only one that he hadn't made cry, as if that was like some badge of honor, you know. So that was sort of my first sort of, okay, men in managerial positions. And I remember thinking to myself, how do I get into these positions? And 20 years ago, which I wish would happen now, but 20 years ago, I didn't look my age, and it really did hold me back from those management and leadership positions, because I was perceived or deemed as being inexperienced. And I did used to have people say to me that it wasn't until I actually opened my mouth did people actually take me seriously, which I found at the time, oh, well, you know, walking in with like, you know, young, blonde, you know, that kind of thing. Oh, well, and then I'll open my mouth. And now actually I sort of look back at it and think that really did hold me back, and it's a little bit rude. But again, there's that acceptance part that I suppose what Helen was saying, that you didn't really know that. Now I would have issue with that. And now I'm sort of in this very strange kind of bias, whereas I'm 45 and look my age now, but I'm actually facing one around the size of my company as the bias, which is really bizarre, because we are two female directors, both diverse, we, you know, as directors, but both women. We have associates that work for us, but we have branded ourselves as an executive kind of, you know, boutique consultancy. We don't want to get any bigger. We're really happy with our agile working and our different skills. But now I'm kind of seen as, because I'm a small company that's run by two women, I'm, you know, less effective, that, oh, maybe, you know, I'm less profitable, or, you know, we don't have the capacity. And that's a bias now I'm having to go against, because I'm kind of saying that doesn't make any difference. As a consultancy, doesn't matter how small or big I am, we have the skills and the ability to work on our bottom line, and we are very profitable. So that's now something I'm having to deal with, you know, the fact that I'm small and unique rather than playing against the bigger players. So that's sort of the bias side of my life, really.
That's really interesting. And what I found quite interesting from all of your accounts there, apart from Agnes, I suppose, but then again, she did touch on it, is the fact that you may have all in one way or another experienced some kind of inequality or bias during your careers, but you've all made a point of saying, but it didn't really affect me and I overcame it, and I perhaps ignored some of those comments. So what is it about you as a collective group of successful women that has allowed you to push those comments aside and those feelings aside? Because I imagine for some people it's not quite so easy, and there'll be varying levels of inequality and bias that different people do face in the workplace. But why are you here? Why are you in the positions that you're in? Why are you strong enough within yourselves to be able to not let those comments and not let the things that shouldn't be said, as Helen said, the passive sexist comments in a typical environment when you work with a lot of men? And I completely know what you're saying there, and you just laugh it off, but actually it's not right and they shouldn't be speaking to you in that way. So why are you able to do that?
I believe, for me, is belief in myself, that I am a great leader. And it's something that I have wanted. I work very, very hard, like everybody. I'd like to think that I'm inspirational, but you know, that's dependent on other people. But you know, I have incredibly high standards, and one thing I love is supporting women and speaking up for, you know, strong leaders. You know, I believe in helping people and people helping me. You know, I don't believe it's just me against the world. I believe that in the camaraderie.
Yeah, absolutely. Michelle?
I must be inaudible. I just see the world in the world of Michelle, and I think I just go back to the guiding principles that I was brought up with, and that is basically you treat others how you want to be treated yourself. So I would hope that everyone I work with mirrors how I treat them. I think that I'm always trying, and I hope the people that work with me would say that, I'm always trying to look for opportunities, not just for me, but for other people, and to look how to create value that way. When you do that, people respond back to you regardless of their sex. They will come back and respond and want to work with you. I think there is just always something incredibly important about intelligently putting your point across and separating out emotion from the way you operate within business and your day-to-day activity, regardless of what your sex is. I mean, if I've ever had a situation, and I'm going to be really honest about this, and I have to say, I can't sit here and say that there have been times when I've been offended by that. There have been times when I've made a sale, or I've, not with anyone at Sheffield Hallam, by the way, or you know, to work with anybody, where I've done a bit of a wink and a bit of a flirt because I know it works. So you can't be hypocritical about it. It's about reading the situation. I think the most important thing, I think, is get yourself some good, strong mentors who are prepared to tell you the honest truth about how you work and how you operate, and will give you an honest answer. Behave wisely and behave intelligently. And the biggest thing is work with integrity. And that comes back at you. I think that comes back at you. I mean, I don't really publicize what I do, and all of my business comes from word of mouth, from people who literally have worked with me and have contact with me, and that's because they know I'll go the extra mile if I can, and I will always operate within the business environment with integrity. And I think that's the answer in terms of the question of how I've got where I've got to be. I don't think that's entrepreneurial. I think that's being a good human being. Sorry, I may have just made myself.
Don't apologise. No, not at all.
I'm not about to heal the world.
No, not at all. It's a great point of view, and it's absolutely welcome. And yes, or Helen, would you like to comment further?
I'll just say that it comes from, I guess, growing up and people that you have around you that gives you that confidence that you can, you know, face the situation, you know, and be a strong person. not be, affected, or, be affected, but be able to share with people around you and get that support. So it is very much, different people, different circumstances that can, fight or not be able to fight these kind of offences.
Yeah, absolutely. Helen?
For me, it comes down to courage, and being courageous of wanting to push down walls and stretch comfort zones, and that's irrelevant if you're a female or a man. If you're wanting to achieve something for yourself in business, you want to test status quo, you want to challenge yourself, you've got to be willing to be courageous.
Absolutely. And a few of you touched on it then about the culture you were brought up in, or the people that inspired you, or your role models. So who were your role models, and how did they encourage you and inspire you to be these strong women that you are?
Ironically enough, mine was my dad. He's always been entrepreneurial. I've always been surrounded by his entrepreneurial mindset and actions. So therefore, I've always adopted that want and desire to be in business, and to, like I've said, about being courageous and stretching out of those boundaries and what have you. This is another bit of irony, though, is even though my dad was my role model and has been a huge inspiration to me, he took the stance to actually still question me and put doubt into me. And it was as though it was highly contradictory, because in one breath he would support me and has always said that he'd want me to be on a board of directors and have a sales directorship in a corporate company. Then in the next breath he would be questioning me and saying things about not necessarily putting myself forward for things. So it was contradictory in terms of his level of support. And he actually questioned my audacity of coming out of the corporate world and being my own boss, questioning the fact of, would I be able to do it? Have I got that resilience? Have I got that ability to do that? And it wasn't until I'm also in business with my father as well. That's another business. But we was in a meeting with stakeholders, and we got out and finished the meeting, got out into the car, and he's like, this is only a few years back, by the way, and he said, oh, really well done there, H. I'm like, oh, cheers, Dad. He's like, no, you really held your own and conducted yourself brilliantly. I'm like, Dad, I'm whatever I was at the time, 30, 35, 36, and I said, I've been doing this for a number of years. Where do you think I've got like my roles until? And he's like, all right, yeah. And it's like, you never thought that I was cut out for it, and you never thought that a female could go into a meeting like what we've just done. By the way, I was the only girl around the table, and he didn't think that I'd be able to do that. And I was like, that was huge then, in terms of his change in perception of what I was actually capable of.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I bet he didn't realise he was kind of pushing back on you in that way. I bet he thought he was always being really supportive.
Yeah, and then obviously, because then it's a father-daughter relationship there,
yeah,
he would obviously still perceive me as his little girl,
yeah,
and not necessarily see me as like successful and able to conduct myself well in business.
Yeah, absolutely. Would anyone else like to share a role model that they have? Michelle? Sorry. Go on, we'll go Lindsay, then Michelle, thank you.
Sorry, I was just going to say, because actually Helen's is so different from mine, even though it's exactly the same with regards to family. So my dad owns his own company, my mum owns hers, and my two sisters own theirs. And there's so much wealth of skills and experience in there. However, none of it was ever forced onto me or ever given to me. We were of that family whereby if you need help, we're there, but if not, we leave each other alone. And none of us are in the same sector, even though we are all different business owners. So it's quite interesting how we go to each other for help. So if I need accountancy advice, I've got my accountancy sister, and that kind of thing. So we go to each other, but no one's ever gone, oh, do it this way, or, oh, wow, you've done this. It's all been very much like, we're here if you need us. but you know, and that's as far as it's got with my sort of family. So they are role models for me, but only as and when I, you know, would need the help.
Yeah, but it's interesting that there's definitely something there that they're all business owners and founders in their own right, and that's the path that you followed. So that's definitely had some kind of influence, even though it's not being forced upon you, as you say. Michelle, you were going to share.
I never really had any role models in my teens and in my early 20s. I was an obnoxious nightmare. I was one of those kids that came out of school, got good grades, went to university, then went to New York, thought I was the bee's knees, walking down Fifth Avenue with my high heels, and I'd made it. I didn't need a role model, and I was going to conquer the world. And so I actually never had any. In fact, my dad was really annoying. He was always telling me what I should be doing. Unfortunately, it pains me now to realise I'm more similar to him than I would like. But then I had this stuffing kicked out of me. I joined ICI, and all of a sudden I was in this stuffy corporate world, and I found out very quickly that I didn't really fit. I remember being in an ideas session once in a big project meeting, stick on my hand going, yeah, I've got an idea. And I'm the senior director saying, Michelle Kelly, you have no standards. And I had that experience, and then left there and then went to the Welsh Development Agency. I had this other feeling where I just did not fit in. And then suddenly I was thrown and in a tiz and a scramble. And that's when I started looking for a role model. But actually my role model found me, and she is on this call today. And I speak to her most days. She'll know she is Moira Carmen RT. Even now she's supporting me and she's on this call. An incredible woman. She's a strong Glaswegian. She takes no messing. And she found me one day when I was working at the Welsh Development Agency. She actually picked up, she became a consultant. I procured her, and she was a good 15 years older than me. I was trying to manage this woman, and she's unmanageable. And she's just so wise. And I think she just saw me floundering and kind of picked me up and put her under a ring. And basically, I've gone through my career and watched her set up businesses, reinvent herself. Seriously, she has ideas going back and forth from everywhere. And I know I will always get an honest answer from her. I absolutely do. So I have to say that that's my guardian angel in my life. And she'll also tell me very gently when I might be going in the wrong direction, because I do have mad ideas, and she tones them down for me. But yes, that's my mentor.
We all need that sometimes.
I'm really embarrassed for now. I bet.
No, you really picked her up. She sounds amazing. Thank you. And yes.
I've got really, really strong role models and women who, you know, they typify why today, you know, is a special day, International Day for Women. One was my grandma, my African side of the family. About 70 years ago, they quite established traditions whereby men who have a bit of wealth would tend to have multiple wives and multiple, you know, a big family, a lot of children. And so she'd spent 7 years with my granddad, and she was seeing the time whereby he was thinking about, you know, the next wife who could help extend the family. And that was accepted, you know, in principle. Every woman who married knew that she would have to have a co-espouse, because that was just the way things were. And she decided that she wouldn't accept the way things established, you know, things that were established, and that she would speak out. And it wasn't only speaking out within her household, it was speaking out around the village and, you know, mentioning to people that things don't have to be like that. She already had 7 children. The family was big enough. There wasn't a need to get another woman. And it was about showing to people that if you're not happy about something that established, you can, you know, you can raise your voice. And, you know, she eventually lost. My granddad had a second wife, but the principle was that she had, out of her 7 children. She had 3 girls, and she showed the way whereby you can go against what's established, as long as you know how to make your argument. And if you lose, you have challenged, the norm, and that's good enough. And I think that, all her children, men and women, grew up with that idea that I can be independent, I can speak out in life. And I think my mum passed that, got that message. And she worked in the healthcare sector for about 30 years. And decided when she retired to establish a charity to help women. And she wasn't afraid of going and knocking on doors. And that is again, that confidence that you want to do something and just go and push doors. You get some rejections, you get some success, but it's worth doing that. And I think, we've inherited that attitude to life. And I think that's a great example, really, for women, for me, and as an example, that they're really great role model.
Absolutely. It sounds like your grandmother and your mother really epitomised this year's theme of choose to challenge, and they stood up to speak for themselves, and it wasn't just affecting them and their families, it was affecting the other people around them. That's amazing, thank you. Well, that's brought us nicely to the end of our formal panel session, but we've got some questions in the chat. So there's not loads, so I think we'll have time to cover them all. So this next little section, we've got 10 minutes for questions. So Dr. Sally Fowler-Daly said, it's interesting to hear confident voices, but probably worth reflecting on systematic issues. For example, the university sector is well known for underpaying and underpromoting women in senior and academic professional roles. And I know that you don't all come from academic backgrounds, but does anybody have any thoughts on that and how that might come to change in the future? I know it might be a difficult one because you don't represent universities as such. Lindsay?
I don't, but I think, highlighting, especially pay, is becoming more and more important. So I would have thought years ago with my career that I probably wasn't getting paid enough, but it wasn't something that was brought to light. So now, obviously, pay inequalities has been brought to light, and people can, do freedoms of information, can start to look at it, to then start to, provoke that conversation and get that change.
Yeah, thank you, Lindsay. Helen?
I can't comment on obviously the academic side of things, but what I will say is when I'm working with clients around self-worth and their financial set point, it does all come down to what your self-belief is over who you are and how you value yourself. And we do a lot of work with individuals on this very point for getting their pricing right in their price point correct for their products and services. Or, we've worked with corporates where we've had to look at how they value themselves. How can they evidence what they are doing to put something forward that's, non-emotional, that they can put something forward to raise themselves in terms of their own worth and have those difficult conversations around money. Because pay and self-worth comes down to what your money mindset is. And if obviously people are afraid to have those conversations and they're afraid to actually value themselves, there's never ever going to be that leverage and availability basically around enhancing pay gaps and reducing that.
Yeah, I would agree with both points, Lindsay and Helen. In terms of, I can't believe 2021, then, we still have these inequalities, and it's a matter of raising awareness and that way trying to change things around us. And in terms of personal situation, in my 25 years of career, every time I've had to make the case every time with my employees about when I reached the stage where I I was worth having a promotion and the salary increase that was worth. And it was just about going and knock on the door and have that conversation with my boss and, you know, make him see that, you know, I'm worth what I'm asking for. And, you know, I have progress that way. But it was that kind of battle where you every time I had to go and make your case to be recognised. I don't think it's down to the fact that I was a woman. It was just, you know, the way things are sometimes just established, and you just try and, you know, have to try and change things by yourself. Feel confident enough, yes, to go and, you know, make that move.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Agnes. Lindsay or Michelle, would you like to add anything else? You're on mute, Michelle.
Oh yeah, can't work technology.
You're all right.
Hear me now?
Yes.
I totally agree with Sally. And I think it's not just systemic of universities. I think it's systemic of large organisations that have to try and slot you into a role and a type in order to organise themselves in a way to pay and reward. I think I spent 8 years when I was at the Welsh Development Agency in the public sector, a large organisation, bashing my head, starting very politely in the first instance, asking for a pay increase, and then just resorting at the end to quite childish arguments about it's not fair. And I do understand that if you work within a larger organisation and you have a choice to be there, it's very difficult, I know, for an academic to move out of a university environment. It was different for me. I forgot that I had a choice to be there. I forgot that I didn't need to be in the system. And when you're in the system and you're in a large organisation, you get so caught up in the appraisal and where's my next step and how do I move on to the next thing? You forget that you don't have to stay in that system and be that unhappy. And for me, setting up my own business, I think my salary quartered in the first year. And I had loans and I had overdrafts, etc. But I think when I left, it was very difficult. I left and I had for me, actually, I can't believe I forgot to tell you this. I left and I had a sexual discrimination case against the Welsh Assembly government, because what they actually did was, and this shows you what I'm like, I don't think of things like sexism.
Yeah, it's pretty big, this one, Michelle.
Basically, I raised a sexual discrimination case against the university and the Welsh Development Agency, and I won it because I was in a senior director role. I was economic development director when I left, and I'll never forget the day. There was it was about a week before I left, and not out of choice. I'd had Sam, who's our son, who's now 17, and basically they said to me, we need you to come back full time because it's a director role, and I only wanted to do 3 days, and I said it's non-negotiable, I can't. I overachieved on all my targets that year, even on 3 days a week maternity leave, and I know I did. That was in terms of my role. And then I came in one day and I was frog marched very politely into an office with a member of HR and the CEO, who sat me down and said, I'm really sorry, but we're letting you go today. And the reason that they gave was that my role no longer existed anymore. And they walked themselves right into it by saying, well, your role doesn't exist anymore, but because you only want to do it 3 days, we're now putting your role into somebody else's role. So I had them on sexual discrimination and constructive dismissal. I don't know where their legal department was at the time. They frog marched me out of the building. I literally was in the building 5 minutes. I had to take a cardboard box, empty my desk out, and walked out of the building. And that's the best thing they ever did to me, because what they were doing was walking me out of a large organisation, and they gave me a choice that I'd forgotten I had.
What a great story.
And interesting. And the case, we didn't even go to court. I remember I couldn't afford a lawyer at the time, so my dad came and posed as my legal representative at the HR meeting. And sat down and officially took notes, and within about a day they'd given me an offer because they realized they'd handled it so inappropriately.
Very poor.
But what that's made me realize is I sometimes wonder, would I have jumped, and would I still be there now, feeling the injustice that I was getting underpaid and undervalued, if somebody hadn't gone over a cliff to me? And so it just doesn't occur to me now. I love the fact I no longer have to do appraisal. I no longer have to argue for an extra £1,000 in my salary a year. And it does make, it makes such an incredible difference. But that's the thing I would say is, remember, yes, you're in an organisation, but you can choose to walk out the door, hard as it may be. And sometimes you have to just recognise the fact, this structure, I just don't fit into it.
Yeah.
Rather, and you'll exhaust yourself, continue trying to squeeze you into it, continue to try and go for a professorship, continuing to try and push for that extra salary. You're there and you're letting that happen.
Yeah, that's good. And Simon McMaster's just put a really poignant comment saying they pay you, they don't own you. And that's absolutely true. Sums it up.
You just get sucked into this thing of, I've got my appraisal, I've got to do my objectives, I'm going to do this. And then all of a sudden you're in this hamster wheel of...
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm really sorry, I forgot about the sexual discrimination.
Just a minor thing.
Topical.
We have got a few more comments and questions in the chat, but I'm afraid we haven't got time to address them all right now. But I will look through them and share them with the panel at the end. And if you'd like any further introductions, then I'm sure we can facilitate that. So now we are going, Georgina, if you would mind sharing the screen again, please. We're going to move into our first breakout room. And this is where you might have to just bear with us for any kind of technical glitches, because Georgina has got to organise us all into the breakout rooms. So there will be a panel member in each breakout room and a member of the AWRC Accelerator team in all but one of the rooms to help facilitate the chat. So the first question that I'd like us to talk about is, how can we influence equality for future generations? And I know this is quite topical, considering some of the conversations we've had, especially from Helen and Agnes, about how their parents were role models for them and how it influenced them. But how can we influence equality for future generations, and not just for people like us that have come from successful families and backgrounds and have had those family relationships? What about people that are from other backgrounds that are less likely to be engaging in university and engaging in business? So what can we do for them? So as we go into our breakout rooms, let's consider that. And Georgina will just copy and paste that question into the chat so we can all see it to remind ourselves of it. So when you're ready, Georgina, take it away and we can go into our rooms. Or tell me if you need a minute, because I can't see you on the screen.
No, all good.
With the 15-minute countdown, so just to let you know, it's a 10-minute session. So the next topic area we'd like to discuss is, why are female founders less likely to be invested in, and what can we do to change this? What is our role to play? And this has come from statistics from the British Business Bank around female founders and the fact they are far less likely to get invested in compared to their male counterparts. And the statistic is, for every £1 invested, only 1 pence goes to a female founder, which I just find astonishing. So we've got some female founders on the call and on the panel, so it'd be really interesting to get your insights on this. And if there are any investors on the call, to get yours as well. So let's bob into our breakout rooms again. We've got 10 minutes. It'll be the same faces apart from the panel member. We'll have a new panel member to speak to. All right, so when you're ready, Georgina.
Yep, all good.
Thank you. Everyone's just back into the room, so I'll just give a chance for everyone's screens to pop back on. Sorry, Moira, you got cut off mid-sentence.
Story of my life.
Completely unintentional. Great. So what I'm going to do now is, I hope you've got some really good chats and insights out of those. I know my rooms are really interesting. and there's certainly a lot of inspirational people on this call today. So I'm just going to scroll back through the chat to see if there are any questions that got left unanswered from the first panel session. And I encourage anybody else to pop their questions in here as well, and we'll try and get through them all. So moving back to earlier, and this came up from Georgina whilst the panelists were speaking. She asks, do we think men have to be just as courageous and confident to get ahead? And do we think women have to adopt a so-called bossy persona to get as far, with there being fewer spaces for women at the top? And this is open to anybody. It can be to our panelists or anybody else that wants to kind of respond, but feel free to like pop your hand up or unmute yourself. And if two people speak at once, it's okay. We'll sort it out.
Hi, Lisa here. I'm really fascinated by this one because I know we talked in the breakout room about the idea of authenticity, and often we don't learn what that means or have the confidence for it until we're kind of in a more senior position or a little later down in our career. But the idea that one can have one's own voice, one's own way of being, that is, well thought of and authentic to others, is a really important part of how you're received in business or in academia. And for me, finding authenticity and doing it your own way ensures that you have really good and responsible relationships with those around you. And people warm to you more when you are your authentic self, rather than trying to be or emulate some other way of being or some other behaviour. I think it's really important.
Absolutely, thank you.
Yeah, I'd support that with Lisa. I think it's just being yourself, but believing in yourself. So, not shouting out just for the sake of being heard, but having something to say that is meaningful, and that something comes from the heart. And if you just keep to a simple formula. There is one other thing. I remember training this a million years ago in my behavioral science days of, there is a thing that cream doesn't always float to the top. And that sometimes it just needs a wee nudge, so you have to give yourself that wee push, basically, because otherwise you can have all the knowledge in the world, but if you don't, push yourself a little bit forward, that knowledge will just melt away. So just remember that cream doesn't always float to the top.
That's a nice analogy, Moira.
Yeah, I'm going to keep that. I'm going to steal that one.
There are a few comments in the chat that aren't necessarily questions. So, but if anybody wants to pop their hand up and voice their question now, because there aren't any more that I can see in the chat, please do just speak up. It's an open forum.
I just want to say on that point about behaviour and proving a point, particularly from a female perspective, in a competitive environment. I had a boss a while ago that I learned everything from her on how not to be.
Right.
She didn't teach me how to do stuff because she clipped my wings a little bit, but she taught me on everything of how not to be, and it all came down to the approach and the bullshiness and the aggression, because she was proving a point exactly in that way. And I don't think it's necessary. Individuals have spoken there about being yourself, and I think that there is so much to be said for that. You can still be successful, you can still make good decisions, effective decisions, and still have a heart in business.
Yeah.
You don't have to be ruthless, you don't have to be aggressive, you don't have to be the loudest person in the room. You basically don't have to be somebody that somebody doesn't like just to keep pushing. Relentlessness doesn't mean aggression.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it also links to what Gemma's just put in the chat. And she said that she's been told that she's too nice sometimes and that she needs to be more strident in meetings, but she feels she understands the point about being authentic and wants to do it in her own way. So I think that really reinforces that point that you don't have to be somebody else's ideal, you can still be yourself and succeed. Shona, you've raised your hand. Feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like to ask a question. Are you there, Shona?
Unmute. Sorry.
You're okay?
Got it, finally. Sorry, I switched to my tablet. Now I can't find anything.
No, go for it.
One of you brought this up before, and I think part of it is that there are corporate situations or workplace situations, so not necessarily corporations, where the behaviors are so proscribed that you don't have a choice. If you don't, it's not, you are called being strident. None of the other women in the room think you're being strident. You know, that kind of thing. So there are situations where it's not a good fit. And the problem is, I think the older you get, the harder it is to change, to go to a new place. And it is a bit of a leap. I don't have very good pensions because I took a leap. So, you know, you do have to think about the long-term consequences. And I need to get rid of that hand somehow.
Let me see if I can lower it. There you go.
There we go.
I've lowered your hand for you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Shona. Would anyone else like to ask a question or raise a point? You can pop it in the chat or speak up, whatever you feel comfortable with.
Kim, I can't even find my hand up, so
I can see it though now, Sally. That'll do. A real hand is always easier than a little blue hand.
Yeah, I suppose we had a really good conversation in our breakout room, and it's really started me thinking about, you know, the inequalities there are for different women, and one of them is age. You know, as you get to be older, if you're not in a senior position, you really have to work, I think, very hard at keeping your energy up, you know, remaining engaged actually, and allowing other people to bring you in a really, really proactive way, because actually we can all do that for each other. And I think sometimes, you know, the workforce is predominantly, you know, in that sort of middle 40s to middle 50s. And after that, I think people do feel themselves moving to the margins, I suppose one could call it, you know, and that's not necessarily the case, but it can be the case, I think, unless you're really aware of it. So just a thought.
No, I relate to that, Sally, and from what you've said there, it makes it sound like our careers are like going to have to be defined to that really short period of time, because like we've referred to earlier, sometimes you can feel too young and people don't take you seriously because you're too young, and I've felt that before, but then it's the same at the other end. So it's like there's this prime time that you have to succeed, and that's not right at all.
Well, funnily enough, just to come back on that, Kim, I can remember speaking to my brother, who's really an entrepreneur and runs a very big global company. And I said to him, try and imagine taking a year's break at 36 when I had my children, and then I had another child later on. Try and imagine the interruption to your career of doing that. And it did go strike home with him, you know, just that kind of awareness raising about what it means to move out of your career and then move back into it at those significant times.
Absolutely. Michelle, you raised your hand.
Yes, so I'm going to flick something back, which is a challenge. Because basically Sheffield Hallam is a large organisation, and obviously as an AWRC you run mentor programs that basically facilitate and support business. But my question is, what happens after this discussion today? For me, what you've highlighted is there is a massive gap in supporting not only the founder members but also females within Sheffield Hallam as an organisation, and helping them to give them what I would classify as the softer skills to believe in themselves and to assert themselves within the organisation. So you'll probably never employ me again, but I'm fascinated to know if after this you as an organisation are going to walk the talk.
Yeah, completely. That Lisa's raised their hand. She's gonna absolutely say, of course we are, Michelle.
No, this is something that came up earlier in the International Women's Day panel with Helena Kennedy this morning. I'm not sure if many of you were on there, but the idea of being in senior leadership, and I am in Hallam, if I'm not compelled to meet the challenge of the inequalities that you see, then it's a poor show, you know, from my perspective, that I can't look to try to affect change in some way. So we have just got together with the HROD team and with Sarah Akhtar and our research leads, because I've put a stream of work together called Our People. But this is only through the impetus of working with our academics and our researchers. And HR were really, really keen to see what we'd found out and what we're wanting to do. So we've decided to join up in partnership and look specifically at our female colleagues and gender as an action-orientated plan for this next coming year. And we're looking at mentorship, Aurora Fellows for all professional as well as academic women across the institution. Also the intersectionality that crosses different domains of faith and culture and race. So we're looking at those types of funding that we're able to put in around coaching and mentoring. So I hope what I'm saying, Michelle, is, you know, watch this space. We're attempting to affect a call to action. There we go. How big it can be in a large organisation, it isn't going to reach everyone, and it isn't going to reach all corners of the organisation, but hopefully it sends a little ripple. And you know, being compelled is important.
Absolutely. And I know that from our team in the AWRC and down to the accelerator, we're absolutely want to make it better for female founders and are consciously seeking female founders for when we are looking at the other programs that we're hoping to deliver in the future. So I completely agree, Michelle. We all need to listen to what we've spoken about today and put some of that into action. And we're all responsible for that across the university. It isn't just Lisa's job as a senior leader. We've all got to take some responsibility. Moira.
I think it's great, you say, but Rome wasn't built in a day, and it's a big task, isn't it? So well done, Lisa, for you know, looking to take it on. I think one of the worrying things, actually, just as Sally was saying there, you know, about this kind of obviously infinite career. And I think that's one of the things about self-worth. And there's an old saying, here's another one, you know, if it's to be, it's up to me. And, you know, and it's at the end of the day, if you've got that inner drive to go forward, but sometimes some people need a little bit of guidance and a bit of help as to maybe where the transferable skills are. So that maybe that a journey that they're on may have, you know, a kind of end date, if you like, but where can they take the skills that they've accrued over the years and add some value, both for themselves and maybe externally as well. So I think that would be something, maybe Lisa, when you're looking at that, you know, is for those people who might be thinking, oh Christ, you know, I'll come to that age and that's it, I fall off the edge. What else might they be able to do based on the wealth of knowledge that they've acquired?
Yeah, an absolutely untapped area, Maura, and someone coming into also menopause in that kind of, you know, add insult to injury for a career of, you know, of trying and pressure. You think, crikey, there's an injustice, you know, and we don't talk about it and we don't voice it and we don't meet the challenges of it. So
I have to vouch for the fact, though, just to make things more equal, there is such a thing as a menopause as well.
Well, on that note, that's brought us nicely to time. That's a nice nugget to take away with you, everyone. We've actually ran out of time. I was hoping to do a little bit of networking for the last 10 minutes, but we are at the end of our session at 3:30. But I'm actually really glad the conversation was flowing and there were lots of really interesting points that were raised and some good comments and good questions and really thought-provoking ideas. If anybody does want to stay on for an extra 5 minutes, I'll hang around if you want to have a chat, or if you want to meet anybody in the room that you didn't have a chance to speak to today, please let us know and we'll try and facilitate those connections. So you can drop me an email or a message in the chat, or Georgina, and we'll make sure we can do that for you. But thank you so much for such a good session today, and thanks again to our panel members for joining. You were all fantastic and I expected nothing less.
Thanks for doing this. It's been wonderful.
Thank you.
Well done.
Everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.